This is Come Home America with Nick Hancock, episode 14. And this is the podcast that navigates and narrates America's twin crises of identity and order. And today we have a very special guest. That is Gavin Wax. And Gavin, you are with the New York Young Republican Club. You are a podcaster in your own right, the Waxcast. I was just on there. It was awesome. Now, I need to know, which state are you actually in right now, New York or New Jersey?
Right now, I am in my home state of New York as a soon-to-be lockdown subject based on King Cuomo's latest orders. So still here, still stuck here, and we'll have to see what happens over the next few days.
Well, very good. And it looks like no one is in there with you, so I'm glad that you're safe. So anyway, let's talk first off just a little bit about the New York Young Republican Club, because this it hit the news and it was in the New York Times. It was all over the place. No, it was the Daily Mail is where I read it. Probably hit the New York Times too.
New York Times as well, yes.
Yeah, maybe it was the New York Times, as a matter of fact, that I read. It was interesting because you guys have an annual gala. You've been having it for like 100 some odd years, and you still look fresh and young for a 120-year-old person. But okay, enough with the jokes. But no, seriously, so you guys had a big gala, big party, happy faces. And now is the time, we live in such a strange time where if there are too many happy people in one place, that is earth-shattering news, and it did hit international press. So can you just tell us a little bit about what was that all about? And is everyone still a free human being right now, or is anyone facing like charges after this? What happened?
Well, I have to say your dad jokes are impressive, and I hope we hear more of them through the podcast. But yes, it is an old club with a long history of holding such a gala. 108th was the number for this gala. Goes back through 2 world wars, the Spanish flu. So they've always held this gala, and we felt, as a respect not only to tradition, but also as a testament against our ruling elites, that we wanted to hold this gala because our liberties don't just disappear when a virus with a 99.7% survival rate comes into town. There was, we held it in accordance with the law, even though most of these laws are probably unconstitutional and weren't passed by legislatures anyway. We still upheld these, diktats rather, which was basically 150 people capacity. You had to wear masks when you weren't sitting, eating, or drinking, temperature checks, questionnaires, the whole shebang. So we did everything by the book. And I think it's all political theater. I don't really think it's real, but they have threatened prosecution. They've threatened investigation, all for holding an event and, practicing our right to peaceably gather and assemble and associate and, be people, be regular human beings, and other miserable bodies want to squash us. But if we were any other organization, if we were any other political affiliation, there probably would have been no issue. You never would have read it in the New York Times or the Daily Caller or wherever it was. And it's a sad state of affairs for our once free nation. We are anything but as of now.
Yeah, and of course, like the treatment you all got versus the treatment that, say, Gavin Newsom or Lori Lightfoot got was just clear as day. I mean, it's cliche at this point, and in a sense, people have come to just come to be, I don't know, like acclimated to this. Like they think it's just normal that the elites operate under different rules, so it's hardly even seen as hypocrisy, or really hypocrisy is not frowned upon anymore or something. I'm not exactly sure what the psychology is behind it, but it is an interesting thing that no one can ignore. Before getting into, you said if it was any other organization that did this, they wouldn't have been treated the same. And that's partially true, but only in the sense that like no other organization would do this. I mean, you guys are more anarchist libertarian, like just through this action than most the people who adopt those labels. And right. I do want to get into a little bit of what faction of the right the New York Young Republican Club like might maybe just you and Vish or what other people in the club sort of what direction of the GOP or the political right as a whole want to go in. But before we get into a little bit of that, I did just want to note, because I am pretty sure it was the New York Times, that they covered the governor of New Jersey, threatening you guys and threatening Matt Gaetz, the congressman from Florida, saying, I don't want you in the state, and the police are investigating this and yada yada. And he referred to Congressman Gaetz as Congressman Putz, if I remember right.
Is
that right?
correct.
And
yes.
you had referred to. Was it Cuomo? You referred to Cuomo as a schmuck, or
no. Well, yes, a schmuck, but it was in direction at Governor Murphy. I attacked him.
So the same governor. Okay.
Yeah, culturally appropriating Yiddish.
Okay, yeah, and I'm curious if you can maybe provide some context if there's any explanation for this, because the New York Times censored your use of the word schmuck and then just proudly presented Governor Murphy's use of the word putz. So,
I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that.
You didn't know that?
No, yeah. that's great. I love that hypocrisy. I cannot believe
this is a family show, right?
That. But I can't believe they censored my use of schmuck. I mean, look, if you have a standard to censor that kind of language in whatever language it is, English, Yiddish, or whatever, that's fine if you're consistent, because they're both, naughty words, or however you want to describe them. Yeah. I don't even know if they're curses. I don't think they're curses, but they're bad words. If you're going to censor them all, okay, fine. That's a standard. I can abide by it. But if you're only going to censor when I retaliate using a word that probably is not even as strong as putz, then yeah, I don't even know where to begin. But yes, he was acting like a schmuck, and he put all this attention on this gala, and he, was threatened to shut us down. He shut down the restaurant. He's punishing this restaurant who abided by all their rules. The funny thing enough is the restaurant is a tenant of the state because it's on a state park, so they literally pay rent to the state. So it's all this incestuous relationship that they're trying to cover up. But we did everything by the book, and I do appreciate you claiming that we were acting like kind of ANCAPs, because we did have Murray Rothbard as a member back in the day.
I was kidding.
Yeah, he was. We found out. I was like, oh, this is great, because it was in one of his biographies. He mentioned he was a member for a few years when he was kind of like the old right. And maybe we'll make an award for him one of these days when we award an ANCAP. But where the club stands now politically, I mean, I think we would describe ourselves as populists, conservatives, very much anti-establishment, very much anti-elite. We're very much, we have definitely some libertarian positions. I mean, especially as it comes to things like, being able to peaceably assemble, and we're definitely more on the cultural conservative path. But I mean, I'm not going to say that we're all uniform. I mean, it's certainly a big tent, so to speak. Just because we're in New York, we find common ground, because anyone to the right of Ruth Bader Ginsburg is persecuted here. So we team up. They were part of this emerging populist right movement that's taking over the party and taking over sort of the political sphere on the right, in the digital realm and in real life, I suppose.
Right on. So there was breaking news tonight on the Supreme Court, I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong. I saw you tweeting about this, but was it that the Supreme Court just denied a hearing on this case? Like they just refused to hear it in their court? Is that essentially what happened? I heard that the Sicilian judge and the Italian judge might have ruled differently. I don't know. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, I made an Italian joke, because basically people in Italy say Sicilians are black. So I said, oh, Alito and Thomas are our best Italian American and Sicilian American judges. It was a little bit edgy of a joke, but I thought it was funny.
It was great.
Thank you.
Great.
But yeah, as my understanding that they dismissed this, it was on procedural for procedural reasons, that they didn't have jurisdiction, and this was not within their realm. They didn't actually reject it on the merits of the evidence or the case or the substance, which is, I guess a minor victory, you could say. And I know a lot of people are talking about that. Excuse me. Well, what I think we have to focus on, though, is that this case came out of nowhere, and it was able to garner roughly a third of the states in the Union to back it, and 126 members of Congress. That was done in a few days. This was a case that came out of nowhere, was not part of anyone's political calculus as far as this election was concerned up until a few days ago. It was never part of Trump's primary legal strategy. It was never part of the strategy that involved the various state level suits. It was never involved in the strategy of the state legislatures. It kind of came out of nowhere, and it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. I mean, I obviously wish they would have heard this case, but I do think it shows that this kind of civic religion that dominates the right and dominates the American political discourse, where we worship these institutions, where we worship our systems, is completely flawed, because these institutions are broken, they're corrupt, they're a mess. I hope you don't hear that.
Oh, we hear the COVID police.
Yeah, I have a window here. I got to fix this. But it just goes to show that, the conservative movement's obsession with justices and judges has been moot. It hasn't really delivered any results legally, judicially. I mean, some battles here and there, but it's never come in clutch, if I can use that phrase, for us as, left-wing judges have, or left-wing political strategy has. It's always fallen short. This is just one other example of it. And it's a shame that all three of his appointed judges ruled against him, and the only judges that were worth their salt were Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas. So FedSoc was a failure. The Heritage Foundation was a failure. All these conservative political institutions that have, told us how important the courts were for all this time were failures. And we need to look elsewhere, and we need to stop worshiping these institutions because they're inherently flawed. And, the republic is really on its last legs right now, because the case did have a ton of merit. And I think it was a very compelling case, basically talking about the disenfranchisement of citizens in other states based on the lawlessness that had creeped into states like Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, in terms of them violating their own state constitutions, violating the U.S. Constitution in pushing through all these electoral changes. I mean, you can't change the electoral process of a state based on a settlement agreement between the Secretary of State of Georgia and the
Right.
Democrat Party. I mean, you need to validate this through legislatures, legislative action. And we're basically a country now which is ruled by diktat, ruled by backroom deal. It's not ruled by law. It's not ruled by the legislatures. And that's the whole reason for 1776 was to have legislatures create the laws and vote on these laws, and not have this sort of, centralized autocracy that we're seeing now across the country. It's a sad state of affairs.
Yeah, it is a zombie state in many ways. I mean, you have like the Supreme Court, as you mentioned, all of Trump's appointees or nominees or whatever, like not really siding in his favor. And I couldn't really think of anyone who would. I just don't think the institution of the Supreme Court is really built for a moment like this, right? Certainly, if it wasn't, maybe it was like founded in some better image of what justice would be, but certainly to the point that it's come now. I mean, the more centralized the Supreme Court has gotten, the more they've stretched and created meanings out of the Constitution that aren't actually there, the more they've deprived from the states and the people and, more local control of what the country was founded on, the more illegitimate that institution has become. And so the fights for Trump's court justices at times was very entertaining, and Trump as a president, of course, very entertaining, but so much of the country is really rotten from the neck up, from, DC up especially. And, it's not to say that there's nothing worth fighting for, and there's no good guys on Capitol Hill. I know I watched a clip from your guys' gala, and Vish was talking about the work he does in DC and how he needs more people who believe in these things, to help him in DC. And I, my heart goes out to him. I do lean more on sort of a local, more of like a local secessionist, decentralist, nullification sort of strategy, I feel like the times call for. And I think that is the bright spot in this Texas lawsuit, that, as you said, a third or more of the states essentially signed on to as friends of the case, even if most of them were not parties to the case. I thought that the real takeaway here, even if it was political theater, even if it came too little too late and was really a safe place for a lot of these Republicans to go and try and save face and say, hey, I'm on Trump's side or something. Even if it's just political theater in a cynical way, it actually is a good exercise in the country for states to stand up against other states and say, we're not going to be just thrown around here. Like, you didn't join this union just so you could reap the benefits of being in the union and then, take advantage of your neighbors here, the other states. So that was actually a very healthy move. We have precedent set for states ignoring the federal government, and now it's like getting to the point where states are really ignoring other states. And what I find interesting is what the Democrats want, in addition to packing the Supreme Court, in addition to adding new states and growing their numbers in the Senate and the House as a result, and even beyond that, granting amnesty to tens of millions of illegal aliens to grow their vote numbers there. They're all about sort of a revolution within the form of the country to try and keep up appearances, but actually overthrowing the system that we have. But actually,
I agree with all of that. I agree with everything you just said. I think the bright spot is with these institutions that are ironically so worried about institutionalism, they're destroying their own credibility. It's created an environment where once radical concepts such as nullification and secession are coming back into the forefront of the political discourse. I mean, even on Twitter right now, I'm seeing tons of people on the right talking openly about secession. I would like to hear talks about that, constitutional conventions, nullification. I mean, the left was willing to go to these routes when they needed to. We had essential nullification by many states for things like immigration law and other federal policies that we've seen at the state and city and municipal level. So it's a concept that's becoming more widespread, and it's gaining acceptance. I think that's a positive trend in the American body politic. I think the way things are heading as a society, we are becoming so divided as a nation. I just don't see any sort of reconciliation and any unifying consensus ever emerging. I think, if you could get this many states to sign on to a suit, you can get this many states to sign on for a constitutional convention. You can get just as many states to sign on for some kind of nullification. So it's going to be an interesting decade in American history, regardless of what happens with this election. But I am glad to see that finally, if there is another silver lining, I will say that this election, if it ends up as an L for the right, I think it'll serve as sort of a wake-up call for many that we need to stop playing, softball. We need to stop playing by the old school rules of politics, because those days are gone. Those days are long dead. And this is a new political arena. This is a new political landscape, which requires way more, adventurism, I guess maybe is the word, or just more bravado in taking on this leftist Leviathan, which is really seeking to fundamentally crush our rights as a society, as a people, and institute, some of the most horrendous policies you can imagine. I mean, what they've gotten away with this last year would have been inconceivable in years past. And if I had talked to you, Nick, in December or November of last year and told you what would have happened, and even, me and you being people who are on the political right and or had libertarian leanings, me and you probably would have still said, oh, no, you're crazy. That's not going to happen.
One reason I wouldn't have said, one quick thing just to jump in, I may not have said that's crazy just because I was so I was so black-pilled after a decade ago when the TSA started grabbing everyone's boobs and butts,
Yeah.
It was like, and no one said anything. I mean, they kicked off the enhanced pat downs, as they called it, the scope and grope, during Thanksgiving week. It might have been the day before Thanksgiving or something when they instituted all of this, just so no one would say no, because they all had places to go. And so they start confiscating Walter Williams's little eyeglass repair kit. They're abusing American patriots. They're molesting children. They finally stopped doing that to some degree. But then the grandmothers, the cancer victims, everyone just like being mauled at the airports, and that's still going on, and people still justify it. And so actually, when just the hint of a mask mandate was just spoken of, however early that was, I was like, oh yeah, of course, like that's next.
And it's never going to go
And
away now. Now they're saying
yeah,
even with the
right.
vaccine, you can't unmask, and they're shutting down New York City again. I don't know what's going to be left of this city. I don't know what's going to be left of much of urban America when all is said and done. It's kind of funny that these left-wing, autocrats are destroying their own constituencies, which have been so loyal and supportive of their regressive policies. But I heard one theory that actually said that basically it's done purposefully because they're trying to trigger exodus of leftists from these cities and from these communities to flood into, say, more rural America or suburban America or red state
Right.
America in
Right.
order to change, the political dynamics in those states. I could see that. I wouldn't put anything past them because at a certain point, it doesn't make any sense why you would destroy your own state and city and wreck the own economy because, this will still have consequences even for the most deep state deep blue state
Mhm.
governor or mayor.
Right on. And I'll only do this once, like paint a worst case scenario and just ask you maybe a sort of a silly question, but I think it's sort of worth asking. A lot of people must be asking themselves this. Now, I moved my family out of Los Angeles to Fort Wayne, Indiana before COVID, but a lot of people were already relocating either out of California, out of Illinois, out of, some crazy state somewhere. But then after COVID, we saw reports of a lot of people fleeing New York. So I'm just curious, Gavin, like, if things really get worse, like at what point would you have to consider leaving New York? And are you eyeballing anywhere around the country, any region of the country that you think is going to be better set to bounce back or be resilient or be the quote unquote resistance to the Great Reset COVID sort of takeover strategy of the globalists and our power elite? Is there any place you think of going to escape, or are you pretty optimistic about New York?
I'm unfortunately not that optimistic. I mean, I was born and raised here, and I would hate to leave. And my family's here, friends are here. Everything I've built is here, and it would really be a setback to move and have to start all over. But it's not out of the question given what's happening. I know you made a big move as well yourself from California, so you can understand what that's like. But as far as what New York is going through right now, I mean, if it gets to the point where I know there's a bill in the state assembly here where they want to mandate the vaccine. I mean, if I'm forced to inject myself, I think that'll probably be the point where I leave. I'm willing to put up with a lot, but when it comes to my own like bodily, independence and
Yeah.
not being forced to inject myself with some rapidly produced vaccine with no testing and well, barely little testing, and who knows what the side effects may be. That's where I'll probably draw the line and say, you know what, screw this, I'm going to Florida. Short of that, I mean, I'm a lot. Have the economy here could collapse. I'll take advantage of the better rents and I'll be a survivor. But when they start sending out people, you know, making that you can't go and too Orwellian. If it's just an economic depression, if it's just rising crime, I'm willing to put up with it because New York has been through that before and rebounded. But the stuff they're talking about now with the sort of COVID technocratic, policies, that's where I would probably, put my foot down and
Yeah.
say, all right, I'm out of here. I'm out of here
Yeah.
before this
I
gets
mean,
weird.
in California, they essentially mandate vaccines, and then this is the reality across most of the country where you can't put your kids in school without certain vaccinations, and so this will be what they'll do. It's like the ratchet effect, as Professor Robert Higgs put it, the ratchet effect, where they're gonna give you back some of your liberty, but it's never gonna go back to
Yeah.
the way it was, and then they're gonna tell you that the improvement that it's actually an improvement upon what it was before, and so it may not be a direct like harsh vaccine police coming to busting down your door to put a needle in your arm, but if you can't go use public transportation, if you can't go to a concert, if you can't go to a bank, if you can't go to a grocery store, if you can't go outside your dwelling without a vaccine, then what is that? They'll say,
Yeah.
well, it's not mandatory. It's like the income tax. It's voluntary.
I
So
mean and
yeah,
that's the scary thing, like having sort of some kind of medical passport to live a normal life. I mean, they'll find whatever loophole, whatever way they can get around it. It's like, okay, you're not mandated, but you basically can't live a normal life unless you get it. And look, I'm not anti-vax by any means. I
Right.
mean, I'm vaccinated. I have no
I
problem
get it.
getting vaccines for smallpox or really horrendous diseases that have plagued humanity throughout history. But
Mm.
I don't get the flu shot. I've never got the flu shot. I think the only times I've ever got the flu shot, I got the flu. When I do get the flu, I handle it and it's gone, and I build up natural immunity, and I'm a healthy, young person. I don't smoke. I don't have any other,
Right.
comorbidities, so I have no reason to do it. And it's the same thing for coronavirus. I'm pretty sure I already got it. I've never been tested for it. I know I had it early in January. I'm probably sure I have antibodies. And if I have no medical reason to get it because it's a 99.7% survival rate, then I'm not going to get it. But if it is a disease that, if it's if there was a, the bubonic plague came back and there was a vaccine to actually cure the bubonic plague, yes, I would probably take it. So I'm not anti-vax just as fundamentally, but I'm very much against mandating it. I'm against our current policies that you referenced, in California and many other states where, you can't even send your kids to school because of it. I think that's also very regressive and totalitarian stance. But yeah, I mean, that's just, people are going to have to, like you've talked about localism, kind of going off the grid a bit,
Mm.
homeschooling, building local communities, shopping local. I mean, I think we're going to see a renaissance in rural living in this country. I think the major urban centers are going to collapse just due to a commercial real estate collapse, just due to the lack of need for these cities for office space and to centralize capital and labor. I think there's going to be a real decentralization of the population, which is a good thing. And I think, rural living will definitely see a renaissance as people can now work anywhere. So they'll seek out cheaper land values in rural parts of the country and, create basically a rebirth of American small towns, which I think will be a good thing. It's a silver lining.
Yeah, yeah, and I think all of that. Well, I would say some portion of that will happen in sort of a passive sense, in the sense that like that's just incentives will open up price signals will send people to make certain decisions. But in another realm, in a more cultural realm, outside the economic question, it's like people have to be proactively seeking out something new. They have to be able to navigate their world in a very intentional way. I mean, right now we're very passive in how we receive media 24/7. We sort of just are receptors for the culture, and we're not like necessarily actively building everything all around us. And so that will be interesting to see people exercise those muscles that have atrophied for so long. But it is what built this country, what made the country great, and that is the family, the church, the community, and just these mediating institutions that make it so that we can have a society of people serving one another, but not necessarily like just being 100% dependent on the state, and the state having to come and solve every single little problem that comes along. So I'm exactly on the same page as you are on that. Like I could see, I'm really happy with Florida so far, like from what people are telling me. And so, that would be great. And then even, hey, even in New York, if somehow people can develop, sort of underground economies and discover communities that way and push back, we shouldn't give up on anyone anywhere in the country, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Amen.
Um, I'll go back to California someday. Right now, probably not. But anyway, all right. So let's wrap it up here a little bit. Now you have a wax cast. What are you setting out to accomplish on this podcast besides just like interviewing the most interesting people in the shortest amount of time possible? You've knocked out like probably a dozen episodes in a couple days or so. So what are you seeking to accomplish with the wax cast, and where can people find that?
Yeah, man. Thank you. I mean, it's definitely going to slow down in terms of releases. I'm still trying to do a daily podcast, at least Monday through Friday. What I'm trying to accomplish, I mean, I think like you and me recognize, the media is changing, and the new media landscape is definitely shifting towards podcasts, particularly ones that have visual articles and published materials. I just don't think you could really compete in that space anymore. I think you have a much better chance with podcasts, with some kind of digital TV show, so to speak. So I'm trying to explore it. I'm just getting started. There's a lot to learn, but it's really interesting, and I enjoy the discussions. I mean, I spoke to you the other day. I spoke to Tho Bishop. I spoke to a few people that you know, and we had and if I get a small following, it's great. I get a small following. If not, it is what it is. So I'm going to enjoy doing it. I think it plays off well with my newfound social media following. So I cast podcast. It's an interview style podcast, 30, 45 minutes. We just talk about, a variety of topics, both topical and, maybe based on the person in question, if they have an article or something they just wrote about, etc. And you can find us on it's just me, but you can find me on now on iTunes, Spotify, Google, the whole shebang, and you can check out, I believe, Nick, you were episode 3. Yes, you were episode 3, and we have it online now.
Episode 2.
Oh, you were episode 2. Oh, excuse me, episode 2. I want to have you back on again. And you could check us out. I got a website up. We got a Twitter account, the whole thing. So it's interesting. It's kind of like this, just a natural flowing conversations, not too structured. Just riff. I like that. It's more natural. It feels better, and it is what it is. That sounded weird, but yes, you know what I mean.
No, it's exactly right, and it's just like, I mean, in a sense, the times that we're living in, it's like sort of a cliche, but you could almost say like you go crazy, you could go crazy just putting yourself in the news all day long kind of thing. But at the same time, you have to be able to clarify like what's right, what's wrong, what's propaganda, and what's the truth. And how are we going to do that unless like we go out there like unafraid of making mistakes and just having conversations with folks. And it's got to be about that. So it's very valuable what you're doing. And for my part, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. I'm just trying to also just create a log so I can look back and see what was going on, how I thought about things before, and maybe it'll change my perspective in the future, or at least give my kids something to laugh at some years from now. But
the ever-growing Hancock clan.
I know, man. I know it's getting crazy. I mean, it's kind of sad. My producer is my wife, and so it's either like I'm recording during nap.
Offshore American jobs to Brazilians.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, and she should be American. She's more American than most Americans at this point, but no. So yeah, she's my producer, the best wife I could ask for, by far the best producer I could ever ask for, and she's like tackling 2-3 kids at one time during nap time, or lunchtime or bedtime, whenever it is I decide to record. I come down here to record when it gets too crazy upstairs. But we will have you back on again soon, Gavin. It's always awesome talking to you. And so folks, check out Gavin Wax, the Wax Cast. This has been episode 14 of Come Home America with Nick Hancock. And please subscribe, share, like, comment, all those good things. I mean, like we were just saying, it's really dependent on folks, throwing themselves into these decentralized communications systems to fight back against the mainstream media, and just helping us, reflect on what's happening, what to do about it. There's a lot to be done. I have a newsletter, nickhancock.substack.com, and my website, nickhancock.com. Thanks again, Gavin. God bless. We'll see you again next time.